Hello, this is Dr. Controllah Gabi here. I'm going to talk to you about social constructionism. First, here's an overview of what I am going to cover. Number one, I will consider the definition of social constructionism. And secondly, I will also look at how social constructionism is applied. I will begin by using a quote from a famous philosopher from Germany called Nietzsche. He said, "Facts do not exist, only in interpretations," implying that uh, facts on their own do not have a meaning. Facts in isolation, reality in isolation, does not mean anything. It only begins to have a meaning when it is looked at through the eyes of whoever is looking at that particular reality. You may have the same reality, but it means different things to different people. You may have the same phenomenon, but it may mean different things to different people. You can take, for example, a place, right? That particular geographical place may have different symbolisms depending on who is interpreting that particular geographical place. For example, one person may remember that particular area for something wonderful that happened to him, to her. Maybe that's where that person first met their spouse, fell in love, was smitten, and therefore this person is always going to remember that place fondly. So whenever they come across that place or the name of that place, it will likely trigger happy emotions in that particular individual. Right. Still using the same place. If another person had a negative experience at exactly that particular place, that person will take that place to mean something completely different to the first person I gave an example of. To this second person, this place will symbolize, it will mean torture, it will mean trauma, because this person may have gone through a negative experience when they were in that particular place. So it's the same area, but two different people looking at this particular area through different lenses. One is looking at this particular area through the lens of love, passion, being smitten, remembering how how she first met her spouse, and brings joy to that person whenever they remember that place, brings joy to that person whenever they visit that place. Why? Because it's a reminder of when they first fell in love. It's a symbol of love. It's a symbol of uh, positive emotion. And yet, to the other person, the second person we talked about, who may have experienced some very negative encounter in the same place, that place will conjure up some emotions that are not positive. And therefore, this place means different things to different people. If you take the notion of childhood, for example, what Nietzsche is saying is the notion of childhood will begin to make sense. It's brought to life through the interpretation of whoever is considering that notion. Childhood, for someone who had a very enjoyable experience when they were a child, is a time of enjoyment. Childhood is a time of fun, of exploration, of endeavor, of adventure. That's to one person. But a person who had an unhappy childhood, if you ask them about childhood, what childhood means to that person, they are going to tell you a different story. They will tell you a different interpretation of what childhood means. To another person, childhood may mean being vulnerable to abuse. It may mean being abused, being neglected, or going without food. Different people looking at the same notion of what it means to be a child, of what childhood means exactly, what childhood symbolizes. So, what Nietzsche is saying here, childhood, without being connected to a particular person or particular society or particular community, childhood on its own does not mean anything. It begins to mean something when it has been contextualized within the community where it's being experienced, where it's being encountered. That's when childhood begins to come to life. So facts do not exist only in interpretations, or facts do not exist, only interpretations do. So, in light of Nietzsche's observation, therefore, what shall we take social constructionism to mean? There are two common or dominant descriptions of what social constructionism is. The first one is social constructionism refers to a sociological theory examining or exploring collective constructions of communities or societies regarding phenomena that are occurring within those communities or society. The second description is social constructionism concerns itself with the role of jointly constructed understandings or assumptions about reality. So different communities, different societies, different collections of people will have different interpretations of reality. And those interpretations are based on certain assumptions about that same reality. So, therefore, those interpretations, on the basis of the assumptions that are made within these communities, are what we may refer to, therefore, as social constructions. Thus, social construction or a social construct is or can be described as collective constructions of reality. These commonly held understandings and assumptions about reality are what we may describe as or label as social constructions or social constructs. These are jointly constructed understandings of or assumptions about reality. Now on to the application of social constructionism. Social constructionism is applied through exploring or an exploration of commonly held understandings or meanings derived from interactions or from social interactions that are occurring between that society and the subject of construction, between that society or between that community and the phenomenon that is subject of the interpretation. Our understandings, interpretations, and assumptions are a result of how we interact with the subject. Also, our understandings, interpretations, and assumptions are seen in how we interact with the subject. So you will be able to know or to make sense of how a community, for example, socially constructs childhood through how it treats the children living within that community. If children are being made to work, you may infer that children in those communities are constructed as laborers. If children are being protected, if the community is protective of children, you may therefore infer that children within that community are being constructed as needing protection, i.e., they are being constructed as susceptible or vulnerable to attacks, vulnerable to their environment unless they get the protection from the adult community. Uh, if children are being subjected to abuse, maybe some people may infer that, oh, children are actually being constructed as subhuman and therefore they are being maltreated. So you can see how children are constructed within a given community through how that community interacts with those children. The same applies to how communities construct different phenomena occurring within them. You can make sense of the constructions that are within those communities through the way in which these communities interact with those phenomena, with that phenomenon. Now, a summary of social constructionism and social constructions. Social construction does not mean reality is constructed. That's a misconception that is seen in some of the literature that you may come across. It does not mean that reality is not there. Social constructionism, rather, therefore, social construction has to do with an acknowledgement of a reality, right? So the first step is to acknowledge that yes, there is a reality out there, but for it to have meaning, so social constructionism has to do therefore with meanings, assumptions, and understandings rather than a creation of reality. We are not saying you are creating something through how you construct it. No, that thing, that construct, that object, that subject, that phenomenon is there. Social constructionism acknowledges it is there. The only point of clarification that social constructionism contributes is how the phenomenon, how the subject, how the object, how whatever is being constructed begins to make sense at the point of interpretation, at the point of a collective interpretation within a given context. And this collective interpretation is manifest in how this context, it can be a community of people, it can be a society, in how this context interacts with the subject of construction, with that which is being socially constructed. So it's about meanings and understandings and assumptions rather than saying we are creating a reality. The reality is there, but what it means, what it symbolizes, is what social constructionism is concerned about. When you talk about childhood, we are not saying social constructionism is creating childhood. No, it is making sense of childhood, taking cognizance of where this childhood is occurring, of where this childhood is situated, of where this childhood is in existence. It is about how communities collectively, in a way, in a manner of joined understandings, makes sense or will make sense of phenomena, will make sense of the subjects of construction, will make sense of occurrences. That's what social constructionism is about. It's not about creating reality, it's about creating understanding, it's about creating interpretation. The reality is there, and that reality is subjected to interpretations, to assumptions, to understandings. If you would like to understand more and delve deeper into the subject of social constructionism, the following readings will be very, very helpful. Thank you.